Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're happy to have you here today. We got this is a special day. For a couple reasons, frankly. Before we get going on things too in-depthly, let's give it up. Let's wish a belated happy birthday to our to one half of this awesome team. Ryan, happy belated birthday officially on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan podcast.
Yeah, you did it officially on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan Facebook page. I never do any birthday shit for you.
That's
when is
okay.
it, like June or something? Late May, early June?
Nope, it's June. It's okay.
June.
And frankly, I think you did wish me a happy birthday on the Facebook page.
Did I?
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Well, then I'm awesome. What am I talking
You
about?
are.
Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday to you. And speaking of birthdays,
big ugly half-century birthday.
Yep.
Ugh.
Well,
Yeah.
so yeah, you just turned 50. Do you remember what it was like turning 40?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember turning 40, and I enjoyed turning 40. Actually, I liked 40.
That was not filled with the intense sense of existential dread that 50 was filled with at all.
Cool. I look forward to
40
that.
was, it was a milestone, but it was like, geez, I better get a job now. It was kind of more the thinking at that time. Now it's like, I don't know, it's scary. I know that like super old people out there will be like, 50 is so great. You're going to be so happy, but it doesn't feel great. I don't know. It doesn't feel good. What can I say?
Well, there you go.
Just being honest.
But
I appreciate the outpouring. That was really, really nice. And I really thought that, I thought you'd get a picture of both of us in the celebration at the end of Escape to Victory, because I really thought the guy running right in front of me was you for a second until I looked closer and I'm like, no, it's just he just got one with me.
I just put you in there. Yeah,
you should have put both of us in there. I think that's. I don't mean to criticize. That was a really nice gesture, but
maybe I'll just make a poster of that, and I'll put me in there, and that'll just be something you and I can each just have in our office walls. And someday when when this just absolutely blows up and we have our own offices and our own company,
it's nice. You picked a nice one. I share that guy's physique to some degree. He has my movie physique.
I believe that was
if
Michael
you'd put
Caine.
me in the movie, I'd look like a big tomato running after all those guys. But...
I believe that was Michael Caine that I put your head on.
Oh, really? Well, that explains it.
Yeah.
He was about 50 at the time.
Yeah, that's true. He was.
Nice.
So speaking of birthdays, turning 40 this year is one of the arguably the greatest sci-fi film ever. Certainly one of our favorites. And it is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and we are gonna get into it. We are going to deep dive this thing. Ryan and I actually were physically in the same space watching a movie for the first time in at least a few years, since the Pandini started. We watched it the other night. So
it should be fresh in our minds, I hope.
It is very fresh. And anything you want to say about Blade Runner before we get into it and hit the deep dive?
Nah.
All right.
Let's rock. It's who knows how long this show will take. I really, really love Blade Runner.
Yep. This is gonna be a good one. So here we go, everybody. It is time for a deep dive on Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive.
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive.
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive. Deep dive.
Speaking of cyberpunk stories, that's what that is from. Ghost in the Shell, the movie, not Ghost in the Shell, the anime, which you all love. Ghost in the Shell, the movie, which everyone hated. Yep. Nevertheless, kind of nice.
Nevertheless, it provided us, if that movie, the lasting legacy, I think, of that movie is that sounder for the show with Joel and Ryan.
I wanted to find somebody saying something about having a deep dive, and there it was right on the internet for me to steal. That is kismet sometimes. Feels pretty good. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's nice. It's nice to have, what's her face? Scarlett Johansson, like a permanent part of the show. It's cool.
That's true. And I know that's one of the things that she was, that's on her bucket list. Or that was.
We're not sending her residual checks or anything, but
no. But maybe I should Photoshop her into that scene from Escape to Victory.
Just her head floating down the Marianas Trench.
I'm
feeling goofy. Right. Maybe I'm not in the right mood for the super, super serious Blade Runner.
But it's Blade Runner.
We were talking about it after the movie. Like, why did people not like this? Because we were both we watched it very reverently, and we sat here in the dark. And
yeah, I mean, I will say that is the least you and I have talked while the movie is going on. And I was afraid, but like at one point, like 2/3 of the way through the movie, because it was again one of those scenes as they're flying into Tyrell headquarters, I'm like, this movie looks so good. this 4K transfer is unbelievable.
It's a we'll get into the deets, but it's an absolute marvel of visuals and sound, and I mean that's what draws you in when you're seeing it for the first time, I think. And we were like, well, why people should have been in awe of this. I mean, nothing like this had ever been accomplished on film before. Yeah. Truly, there had been some visual amazing films. Ridley's previous film Alien is a stunning visual achievement in filmmaking, in commercial filmmaking anyway, and this is just more of the same on an even broader and bigger scale. But that's the first thing you notice when you get to it. But a little history on Blade Runner, based on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a kind of novella. Most of his novels they're not novels like you think of sci-fi novels. They're kind of they're pamphlets by comparison. But Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's such a great name. The name of the book that Total Recall is based on is We'll Remember It For You Wholesale.
Yeah.
I mean, these titles are spectacular, but they're not particularly cinematic. So everything starts with the title. Blade Runner is the title of a different thing altogether that they had to get the rights to, just to call it that. It's an Alan Norris book based on people smuggling medical supplies. And that story was sort of stuck in a Blade Runner wannabe from the late 90s called Imposter. That's not really an adaptation of the Alan Norris story so much as it has the elements of that story woven into it. It's more of a Philip K. Dick story too. But some of the movies that Philip inspired, and I think this was the first one that they tried to make. and it was essentially a spec script by Hampton Fancher, who for years people in the because he's such an industry outsider that people thought that was like a nom de plume of somebody or the name of somebody, you know, where they just combined a ton of writers' names into one. But Hampton was a real guy. You know, now later when we get documentaries and interviews and all this stuff, you get to experience him in a great way. And we'll talk about that, I guess, at the end, all the cool resources that you have to experience the sort of behind the scenes of Blade Runner that aren't the movie show with Joel and Ryan. We suggest you hang in and watch this first, because this will be the best way.
This is going to be the best one, yeah.
With respect to everybody else, we're the best way to find out about Blade Runner. He wrote this story about this, you know, sort of bleak future where everyone had left Earth and there were just only a few people kind of left behind, and the idea was that there was this special police force who hunted down these robots and killed them. And it even starts with this really interesting scene on a farm where there's a replicant, is what they call the robots, like making it porridge or something on a stove. And it's weird because the film actually had that scene in the script for ages, but it decided, no, you know, introduce this urban world. That's what Ridley brought to it, is this Mobius sort of urban noir thing that isn't exactly part of the novel. The novel, our hero is obsessed with earning enough money by killing robots so that he can buy a sheep, like a real sheep, not a robot sheep, which is a thing that it takes a lot of. It's like buying your first mansion. You just have to save up a lot of money because animals are so rare. Blade Runner touches on this in little ways that are fun, but it doesn't get into like the obsession with animals quite the same way. So I'm rambling a little bit about Philip K. Dick's story, but I guess the point is that Philip, it didn't write this, what the movie ended up being. All his ideas are explored thoroughly in them, and Philip's ideas are great, but none of his movies, save one, Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly, is really loyal version of what the Philip K. Dick story is. But Total Recall, Paycheck, Minority Report, there's a whole bunch more. None of those, they all take his premise and turn them into sort of Hollywood action blockbusters. And it's great because they're the smartest Hollywood blockbusters that we have, actually, are the ones that have this deeper philosophical meaning within them. And that's cool for all of those films. There's a bunch more too that I'm not thinking of, but Philip K. Dick screen adaptations. But it started with Blade Runner. He only lived to see, sadly, a rough cut of Blade Runner, but he got to see some of the effects, and he got to see kind of how the bleak world of the future was brought to life, and he was thoroughly in awe of it, really excited about the project. He was a writer, although he didn't really live again to see how his other works were turned into movies, but he was a writer that understood that the movie's not the thing, and that the idea is really what his writing is about anyway. The examination of self, the question of who are we? You know, that's the biggest question there is in movies, and they all examine that from different angles using different high concept sort of sci-fi ideas, but they're all very personal, like first person stories. And Blade Runner, you know, takes that, and it has elements of that, and it never really lets go of that throughout, but it just expands that into this huge thing. But not exactly an action movie, is it, Joel? It's
very methodical.
But it's a detective story. It's very much we call it neo-noir, the great making of book. It's one of the best books ever written about the making of a movie called Future Noir, and that this has been dubbed that in that style. There have been
Yeah.
several things, none of which are even vaguely as good, that have come out.
Yeah. I mean, you can see, like, we'll talk about some of the different versions that there have been of Blade Runner. But like, you can, there was a version that has a voiceover. You can see why it would have the voiceover, because it is very much like those old detective things that are, old detective noir movies, where you're getting the voiceover of
the old gumshoe explains it all to you, and you get to have a little bit of the first person voice by having that. And so yeah, we'll talk about the infamous voiceovers.
Yeah. Real quick, other let's just Philip K. Dick, Blade Runner, Total Recall, The Man in the High Castle, Adjustment Bureau, Screamers, Radio Free Albemuth. I don't know that one.
Me neither.
Next, based on The Golden Man, Scanner Darkly, Paycheck, Minority Report, Crystal Crypt, Barjo,
Crystal Crypt.
Yeah, Crystal Crypt, based on a short story of the same name. Oh, this was a short film based on the short story of the same name. So those, and obviously, like, the other Blade Runner sequels and the Blade Runner sequel and other sequels. And there's been a few versions of Minority Report, like the TV series. There's been a few versions of Total Recall, obviously. So so those are other Philip K. Dick, Philip Kindred Dick adaptations.
Yeah, but if you know those, then you sort of get it. They all have a wild premise, and they all take that premise and turn it back on the protagonist in a way where they have to spend the whole film confronting directly, because of the high concept, who they are. Sometimes they start out, they don't know who they are. When this movie ends, we're not sure who they are. There's a lot of that that's really, really interesting. And this one is Total Recall is a great example, because that guy literally doesn't know who he is and has to figure it out before you get to the end. And that's great stuff. This is a little trickier than that, because we think we've seen this guy before because of the noirish detective trappings, because of the voiceover that was in the original theatrical version. This guy's a very who's the Maltese Falcon character that Humphrey Bogart plays?
Yeah, that's
very famous.
Say that's Rick as well.
Rick is Casablanca, but
okay, that's right.
Philip Marlowe.
Maltese Falcon.
I'm going to say it's Marlowe.
Sam Spade.
Oh, Sam Spade is Maltese Falcon. So who's Marlowe? He's one of the other ones. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, same diff, basically. The hardened, noir, where the woman walks into his office at the beginning and the author describes her legs in detail. This is the sort of story we're talking about. This is a little different. Maybe we should start back at the beginning with the Lad Company. My favorite movie logo, the only moment Joel ruined in our screening of Blade Runner was this making fun of the Lad Company logo. Not cool, but I kept it. I kept it inside. I knew I would get to vent.
So to be fair, I thought of course, once again, I thought I was hilarious, because we're watching this gorgeous 4K, transfer. I mean, the thing looks stunning, and the first thing we see is that little, essentially, like old school printer, bitmap readout, of, and then it becomes the Lad Company thing. And I just said, man, these effects are horrible.
But they're not. They're awesome.
No, they're not. They're
John
amazing.
Williams' Lad Company theme is awesome. It's weird that this is the only. It's a tree is the logo, and this is the only black logo. Usually it's white, and it looks really terrible in white. Like, it looks like Joel was claiming this looked, but this animation is amazing, I think. And the music's really classy. And Alan Ladd Jr. is just a super cool guy in the history of movies. So I'm very reverent about it. And you don't get to see it very often. It's here. It's at the beginning of Outland. It's at the beginning of all the Police Academy movies. That's where people are most used to seeing it.
Yep.
Ladd Company, when Alan Ladd was fired from Fox for championing Star Wars and the Alien and movies that were big hits, he was fired basically because he gave too much controlling interest of those projects away to its creators. He was a very, very beloved creative movie executive. He did that in the case of Star Wars, just to keep the thing afloat, and because nobody thought that little plastic versions of the characters from the movie were going to still be selling, 45 years later, like hotcakes. So giving the rights back to merchandising was a thing that was like, whatever, sure.
Yeah.
But he was a champion of those things and a really, really interesting guy. We've talked about him in Star Wars episodes. We talked a lot about him and how he helped set up Alien with Ridley Scott. And when he was fired, he started his own shingle. It's not really his own studio per se. It was like a production house housed within Warner Brothers at the time, and sometimes affiliated with Orion Pictures as well. They were all kind of inbred together back in '82, and made some pretty good movies. And that Police Academy series allowed him to retire in wealth and happiness, and just be a fun, like every 4 years I'll slap my name on something kind of producer, that's the life, in my opinion, that's what you want to get to. So that's cool. Ladd Company, in association with Sir Run Run Shah. He's a East Indian British guy. If you know kind of what I'm talking about with that. Sorry, I'm maybe not saying it very eloquently, but he's a knighted English part of the aristocracy to some degree, but he's from and his roots of his family go back to the British occupation of India. He's an eccentric character who dumped some money into this thing. Tandem Productions actually produced it. Warner distributed it. Ladd Company, was the production house. So you have all these different interests, and it's through the years, it's made Blade Runner very complicated rights issues. Even Vangelis maintained the rights over his own music in the film, and that made releasing a soundtrack of his music sort of impossible for 10 years. And made, broadcast versions of it like would differ slightly for various reasons. And you had to get all these producers and controlling interests, all of whom lost money on Blade Runner in 1982, to agree on releases. And that was just a really, really difficult thing. So it wasn't a big studio movie, even though it was hardly an independent movie either. It was this weird Blade Runner partnership that produced the thing and brought it into being. But the company we get to see at the beginning, thank goodness, in its awesome green line art tree on black screen, which matches the credits to a T, is the Ladd Company, which is right. Because again, as with most of these type projects, it was the Ladd Company who was really like, I know there's all these problems, but geez, we like what we're seeing. They were the only ones that were like happy throughout this process with what was happening. Everybody else was up in arms, and there was all this pressure, blah, blah, blah. We talked about that during Alien 2. It was like Ridley, when he stopped making commercials, the first movie he made was The Duelists, which was this really great, but still rather modest period adventure tale. That would cost, trillions to make today. But back then it was just, you found the right places where you wanted to shoot in France and Italy, and you just went off and did it. And it was cool. Yeah. Swords and uniforms, no problem. And we've been using those in movies for years. We'll just go into the warehouses and pick them out for you. And then Alien, which again had a lot of producers breathing down their necks on them all the time. Producers that, even though they were filmmakers, were just obsessed and terrified of the thing becoming an art film instead of a big commercial property. And we talk about the corporate films of today, which these don't even vaguely resemble those.
Yeah.
They don't even, there's nothing about them. Everything's on film. Everything's like, has to be created with rather genius. The only computer animated thing in Blade Runner is the logo that Joel's talking about. So I guess it is comparatively cheap looking, or at least the style is very, this is what a modern logo looks like in 1982. It definitely has that feel to it. But man, we watched it in 4K and there was no shimmering and all that line art and stuff, and it's just perfectly preserved. And the music sounds great. It doesn't sound like it's coming from a speaker inside a coffee can. It sounds full and lush just on the logo.
Yeah.
And when when those drums kick in and the blackout, we talked about Vangelis's musical score in depth back in the electronic musical scores episode, way back at the beginning of season 2 someplace. Go find it. And Vangelis, known for his synthesizers and his keyboards and his twinkly piano, and there's plenty of that in this. But I said in my print review, and I'll say it again now, there's so much more. There's all this, and this is really true of his music from this era in general. There's so much more than just that. No offense to these guys, because they're awesome, but that sort of airy, breathy Tangerine Dream, like computer sequenced sound, which is really awesome. I still really, really love it. But that stuff feels retro, like you think it would, because it really is the synthesizer trends of the day and the sounds of the day. And this stuff isn't. This sounds like it's otherworldly, and it exists out of time. There's certainly lots of weird synth washes and lots of ARPs and Rolands and so the stuff is there. But because you have all these Middle Eastern chants and all this sort of howling Japanese like percussion and stuff, and these big giant drums and the wind chimes, the wooden blocks, just all this crap that sounds like he's recording it in an airplane hangar. It just feels huge in a way that little analog keyboard scores of the day, even the best ones, don't achieve that because they just don't have. It's a musical vision thing that you just have to have in your head. You want the stuff to sound this big instead of like this. Yeah. And it makes all the difference in the world because it helps greatly expand this world. The first thing we see is a very real thing. It's this coke refinery of some kind, or this oil refinery that's actually outside of actual Los Angeles. And they shoot this sort of low helicopter flyover of that after we watch the credits roll by. And it's amazing. And then behind that is this matte painting of this giant model that they made. Like, we've seen some of the great models, and we've talked about some of them. The spaceship in the black hole. If you've ever seen the soundstage they shot that model on, and how detailed it was. That's the idea we're talking about here. This building, or it's multiple pyramid-like buildings with these weird angled side towers and stuff. It's a miracle of architectural design. It's really, really special. Sid Mead, he's credited as a future visualist, and he designed the flying cars that we see in this opening sequence, and he designed certain things by drawing them, and then of course they had to be realized by the production team. But that building is kind of amazing, and let this be a lesson to people, Peter Jackson and other cool but still sort of untethered to reality directors of the day, that if they were to do this opening today, that you would zoom all the way in, and you would zoom directly through the wall and through the window and right into this character's eyeball. That is impossible. No camera could do that. you would feel the impossibility of it when you were watching it. You would feel the digital fakery of it, regardless of how well it looked.
Right.
This opening achieves that. You fly over the city of industry, this gross industrial park that's belching fire and smoke into the atmosphere, and you hit this giant labyrinthian, just massive in scale, corporate headquarters of the makers of these androids that are causing the world so much problems, and the sort of ire of our story. But he does it by moving in. We're definitely moving in and zooming in. You get that feeling. But he does it by cutting, by skipping time, by being efficient. The way he cuts back and forth between a ceiling fan on a floor and then a window where you can see a fan moving, and then back. It's ingenious, and it's so artful, and it's just absolutely visually stunning, and it's sort of nothing's even happened, and the movie's already kind of taken your breath away.
Yeah.
Eventually we land on, this is kind of we'll talk about eyes the whole show, but eventually we land on the eye of this Blade Runner. Holden is his name. And his eyeball is basically his iris of his eye, the gloss over his eye is reflecting this urban hellscape back at us before we get on with the scene. What were you going to say, Joel?
Well, I mean, but we got to talk about the little the narration that pops up on the screen.
Well, we could just read it. Or maybe before we get too much more into the show, we should just read one of those 4-sentence plot synopses so that I don't have to keep telling the story of the thing.
Sure, but one of the things I wanted to quick touch on.
But you shouldn't be learning the story of Blade Runner from us, y'all. This is really a show where you should be watching this before you dive into
one of the things.
Dive. I think that's true of all deep dives, but really don't listen to our episode on Blade Runner without having seen it. Just trust us that even if you don't like it, and a lot of people don't, you'll be a better student of cinema for having seen it. It's an important one to cross off that list, I think.
One of the things that occurred to me when you were talking about the score and the multitude of different things that Vangelis used to create this soundscape, it also plays into the art direction and creation of and this world building that's in Blade Runner. There's a lot of electronics and digital and artificiality to the visual scape and the audio scape, but there's also a lot of natural elements as well, and I think that it really does help build the world that you can see that this is like there's a logic to the design of all of these things, thinking about where would we as humanity go as we what are the natural things that we would hold on to, and what are the things that we would create artificial versions of or try to improve with technology. And to me, that's one of the really effective things about how this movie looks is the collaboration and juxtaposition of that natural and artificial, so that it all just completely makes sense.
And interiors, like Deckard's apartment is based on the Waterhouse. Who's the guy?
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, thank you, Frank Lloyd Wright. It's got especially his little concrete tiles and stuff like that. It's just full of stuff. Like Joel said, it's full of actual stuff, old clocks, photographs, like just organic things compared to what we expect the future to be. The police station, when we enter it, is an actual train station where they shot it. And it feels out of the 40s or 50s. It gives you that noir feel. They show the building, which looks like some futuristic building. When you get inside of it, it's super old school.
And it pans down and you see the top of the office area.
Yeah.
and you see that layer of caked on dust and dirt and grime and crap that has been forgotten up there for years. To me, that was one of the great things that in watching it this time, was seeing that level of detail of, it's not like everything is shiny and clean, and this is very much a forgotten or disposable land. Anyway, let's
the idea of meads was that all this technology and all this fancy stuff was built upon the old world, just like we would do it. So you get to experience both in a really brilliant way visually, where because you really get the feeling of an old, out of time, like post-war noir pick.
Mm-hmm.
But it has all this amazing tech and visual stunning stuff on it, and there's a lot of stunning moments in it. We'll talk about them, but no more stunning than the zoom in on the Tyrell Corporation's corporate headquarters at the beginning of the film. It's just amazing looking stuff. And then we start with a really super weird, and this is such a brave way to start the movie, this interrogation scene. Mm-hmm. Or this interview. It's just a test, Holden says.
We do get established at the very top that the Tyrell Corporation has made these replicants that they're and as we find out later, their motto is more human than human. That it made to do some of the menial labor. It's that dream. We'll have androids to do all of the crap work, leaving us to just be in leisure and pleasure. But through there was a revolt of some replicants, which led to essentially the law that all replicants needed to be there are no replicants allowed on Earth. Replicants can still be used to fight wars and do all of these other things, but no
in the very expensive and very costly colonization of outer space, they're still very much in vogue, and that's why this company is on top of the world financially. But they're not allowed on Earth because they've become sophisticated enough to have their own ideas about things. That's the only way that a mutiny can happen or a revolution can happen, is that, and they're constantly trying to find a way to keep them sophisticated, to keep their performances super high. They're superhuman and strength and intelligence and all this stuff, but they're not stable. And we through the replicant characters in the film, there's 4 of them. We get to see all the different sides of that and stuff, which is really important. But yeah, Joel's right. Bloody mutiny on an outer world, whatever, caused them to be banned on Earth, and they're these what does it say? They're these Blade Runner units, the police squad, who were assigned to kill them on sight. This isn't called execution; it is called retirement. Is how that ends. So we see Morgan Paul, I believe is the actor's name, from Norma Ray and a bunch of other stuff from around the same time. He was hired because he resembles Harrison Ford somewhat, to basically be Harrison during the screen tests. So he went through the screen test process and read with all the different characters that were going to be doing these different jobs, the American ones anyway. And then was given this little role in the movie, kind of as a reward and as a sort of fun, until you really get a look at him with his voice. And he doesn't look like Harrison Ford, but he does resemble him much more than any other actor you could get, and much more than an actor you would get if you were really casting the role. You would make sure he didn't resemble your leading man at all. You wouldn't. I mean, that's a casting trick. You try and not have a bunch of people that look the same in your movie. It just confuses people. So this is a little sleight of hand where they play where like that. Is that him? Is that oh, nope, that's some other guy. And that's kind of fun. And Morgan's fantastic in this scene.
It also plays into a debate that we'll get into as we get further into the movie. about the nature of these Blade Runners. So we have Holden, and because there's been reports of some.
Yeah, although we don't know that yet. The cool thing about this scene is that we don't know any of that. We're explained that after the fact. But this starts with a new employee coming in and sitting down, and a guy sitting across the table from him who could just be some corporate stooge. We don't know. He's got this sort of weird steampunk looking laptop thing in front of him with a little air bladder and strange little device that comes up in front of his face that he looks through. It's all very practical and very cool looking, and it looks like a sci-fi thing, but it looks like it was built like for the Wizard of Oz at the same time. That aspect is very much to that machine. He says this is a test, and the weird chemistry and the weird juju between these two characters as they're talking to each other is extremely tense and uncomfortable right from the start, which is great. It's really well played. The new employee of the Tyrell Corporation's name is Leon, and he doesn't seem like the brightest bulb in the bunch. And but he's asked these really, really strange questions, and I guess we won't get into the details of the questions. The show will take all day. We're only in the first scene in the movie, half an hour into the show, but he's asked these really, really weird questions that we learn later are designed to provoke an emotional response. And they provoke an emotional response in us, not just the way it's shot and edited or the way it sounds, which is very stylistic. They're just weird questions that make you go, what? Yeah. They make you react. We're people, and we react to these the way people are supposed to. Replicants react to them in similar ways, but in different ways, which is what this test is. It's designed to identify replicants. And when Leon, who is a little bit of a dullard compared to other replicants, is clever enough to know that he's been made, so he's smarter than he's letting on, essentially. He's a really interesting character. Somehow got into this, infiltrated this testing room with a handgun and shoots Holden again in a really stylized, kind of crazy way. And then we cut back out to the world of the story where it's safe and quiet and everything's cool. And that is when we meet our hero waiting in line to order some dumplings, it looks like, and some noodles. Actually looks pretty appetizing. So he's sitting down, and of course in the theatrical version, I won't say what he says here, but there's a long voiceover where he introduces himself to us. Yeah. In the version Joel and I just watched.
I believe he describes his own legs.
Does he? I walked up to the to the Chinese food cart.
I noticed my reflection, and my legs went all the way down. And
the legs are coming. They're coming. Don't worry. They're just maybe not in the same order you're used to. It's not quite that big a ripoff. But yeah, he explains everything. His marriage, what he used to do for a living. I mean, it's just Johnny the Explainer in the worst possible way. Yeah. It's helpful, though. Those voiceovers, I can never watch Blade Runner without them, without knowing what they are in my head. And they do explain a lot. And that's useful. That's welcoming in a way. They're not particularly well done. They're a little heavy in the way they're written compared to the way the film, its actual dialogue isn't super stylized, is very straightforward and very sort of weird and minimalist. So they're not grateful in that. But what you find, whether you've seen it with voiceovers or not, is that when the voiceover is gone, you're required as an audience member to put the pieces together yourself, and it's so much better when you're made to do that, because everything you need to know is there. You don't need to know this stuff. He gets hijacked by a very memorable Harrison Ford we're talking about as Rick Deckard, just about to start eating his noodles, and he gets hijacked by a cop played by Edward James Olmos in a weird, the character's name is Gaff, in a weird performance that almost basically created from the ground up. This guy on the page was almost nothing, and almost brought his Hispanic history with him. He brought his Hungarian history with him. He basically created this language that this guy speaks. And was into the makeup job that's done on him and the contact lenses, and he walks with a cane. He's disabled in a way we don't know his story at all, but he's got all these weird eccentric details about him that are super, super fun. And the best thing about him, and we'll talk about this every time it shows up in the movie, is his hobby is origami.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of the storytelling, as it turns out eventually. So he grabs Deckard, threatens him to come in, drops the name of his previous commanding officer, and Deck sees the writing on the wall. And he's like, well, I better cooperate here. It's just going to be nothing but trouble for me. And they get in a little flying car, just like we'd hope they'd be in the future. And we fly off to police headquarters. And again, just a visual. The flying sequence is shot with him still eating his Chinese food through the windshield of this flying police car. So we see the city reflected in it. We see what's inside of it. We see all the little controls. We see some recycled. This film recycles a lot of stuff, but one thing it recycles whole hog from Alien is the purge graphics, and all that is like exactly the stuff that was on the computer displays in Alien when they're landing that drop ship. And it's neat. It's neat to see that stuff again. Maybe this all takes place in the same world. It certainly could. It's an entirely different kind of movie, but it could be the same universe basically, if you wanted it to be. And that sequence is great. The music, there's several moments in the film where the music just allowed to take over. And when you have a musician of Vangelis's caliber, he knows when it's my turn to take stage. I mean, he knows to really do it, and he delivers a stunning cue here. Joel talks about when we crossfade from the thing approaching the landing threshold to the train station where they filled it. When you zoom down and see the cross section of the walls and the roof on his desk, we see that most of the offices in this place don't have the luxury of a ceiling at all. They're just open air to the world. But Lieutenant Bryant, played by the great Emmett Walsh, sitting behind the counter with a grin on his face. I was going to use a well-worn adjective for the type of grin.
It's a very knowing grin. It is a little bit of smugness, a little bit of
Walsh is just fantastic. All he does really is deliver exposition, but the great hey pal, you wouldn't have come if I just asked you. Walsh, and something about Walsh's line delivery. I will stand out here all day if we have to. Kind of cold out here. Sure hope we don't have to.
Yep.
Just the way he talks is so awesome. So he's a great. He lightens this film up a little bit, just a teeny little bit, and it needs that in a couple of places where it can get it. He basically says 4 replicants tried to break into the Tyrell Corporation. They're this latest kind. You can't see them coming. They look and act just like people. The only way to get them is with the Voight comp test, which, doesn't work as well as it used to because they're psychologically more complex. We later not in this scene, but we later learn why. And then we get these, it's great. It's all exposition. We get these dossiers on the 4 replicants. We get the story about how there were 6 of them, but 2 of them died. In the theatrical version and all other versions, it's screwed up. There's a missing replicant because it's one of them died, and then there's 5 of them, and then there's more later when he says you got to kill more. There's more than there should be. The math is all completely wrong. The final cut that Joel and I watched fixes all this. It's just all fixed. So the math is correct, and you're not going, what? I thought it was. Every time the numbers come up, they're goofed in the original because of all these things that they moved around. And because there was an entire replicant character who was in the film that they cut out. There's a replicant funeral that we get to watch, just part of the work print that was shot and exists, but it was not part of the final cut. So maybe we'll talk about that. I don't know. We're gonna run out of time. This scene is great though, in that it gets a ton of stuff done. Deckard doesn't want to have anything to do with this. He's got that great line, "I was quit when I came in here. I'm twice as quit now." That's a fantastic noir bit of dialogue by whoever wrote it, Fancher or David Peoples, are the credited screenwriters on the film. And as he's about to leave, he says, "Hey, you know the score, man. You're either cop or you're little people." And he's threatening him. And he's like, "Oh, okay. So you're really gonna pull the, threatening me card. I don't have any choice here." And he was like, "Nope." He talks about how these new Nexus 6 replicants are so human-like that the built-in safeguard against them taking over the universe, essentially, is that they only live for, 4 years? 5 years?
4 years.
4-year lifespan, which you can see the look on Deckard's face, like, Jesus, that's kind of awful. Harrison Ford gets criticized for being sort of a blank slate in this film, but that's not really true. Every time they cut to him, he gives you something that's really kind of neat. But it is relatively subtle for a guy who's confronting all this stuff head on. He doesn't let you in all that much. He doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to be doing this. So all of it is, I don't want to deal with what this means. I'm just going to do it and be done with it. He's clearly an alcoholic. Every time he's in a place where he can drink, he's drinking something. I don't want to diagnose him, but he drinks a ton. I suspect he's an alcoholic. And I think that's an important part of the character and the way he reacts to things. And how he uses that to self-medicate sort of the horrors of his past. The origami that's made, Gaff is sitting in the back of the scene, quietly listening and observing. Again, without it ever being said, you get the feeling that Gaff wants to be top cop, that he's pissed that he's not on the case. It's clearly because of the way he's limping around, where he's not really capable of doing some of the stuff that Ford does. Ford mentions Holden. He says, "Well, have Holden do it." And he's like, Holden, who we think we see killed, is actually still alive. He can breathe okay as long as no one unplugs him. Wallace says. There's a scene that was cut from the film. The two big deleted scenes, definitely replicant funeral, and the other one is Deckard going to visit Holden, and Holden giving him the warning. Those two scenes are awesome deleted scenes in Blade Runner lore. There's too much to go into about them, but we'll just leave it there. At least we mentioned them. We don't know what these Nexuses are. We don't know if you're going to be able to spot them. Tyrell Corporation's got one. We're going to send you over there to examine it and see if the machine works. And he's like, and if the machine doesn't work, and Walsh gives the knowing look, and boom, we cut. We're back in a spinner, one of these flying cars, and we're flying off to Tyrell Corp, which again, we get to see from a bunch of different angles. Again, people were bored with this movie because it's a lot of architecture and a lot of effects and a lot of drawn out driving from here to there, a lot of repeated stuff, which we'll talk about. Leon's opening interview gets repeated many, many times throughout the movie in a really, really brilliant way. When he's listening to it on a machine, it's the version we heard. When he's remembering it and we're hearing it, it's an alternate take where he sounds slightly different and the live readings are sort of different because memory is different than a recorded thing. That's a tiny little detail that's lost in a huge movie that you really only get when you watch it on your 13th time. But it's there and it's great. It's every moment is loaded up with something that has some sort of deeper meaning like that, which is very, very cool.
Now, I'm trying to, speaking of memory, I'm trying to remember now, is it Bryant that shows him who he's looking for, the Leon, Roy, Pris, and Zora, or is that at Tyrell? Okay. So that's Brian. That's what I thought. Okay. So we do see, okay, here's who they are, and here's here's who you're looking for, and here's why they're, so, like a couple of these guys, like especially Roy is like
Superhuman
he's a
strength,
military super
strategic
soldier,
intelligence, probably the leader. Yep, exactly, a military veteran, essentially. Then
one's a pleasure model, one's one's kind of a grunt.
Zora's the second one, played by Joanna Cassidy. She's an assassin.
Yeah,
nice.
So
Leon, who we've already met, is basically a laborer, a load guy who works in the docks someplace and just works 24 hours a day without a break.
Yep.
Super strong. I think he's less simple than we think, but he is very direct and straightforward compared to these other characters who are a little trickier. And Pris, basic pleasure model. Nothing special about her.
That's right. She just like the kind you would send on a military transport. So
people have sex with her all the time. It's just a sex slave, basically, played by Daryl Hannah. So it's it's not Daryl Hannah's first movie by a long shot, but it's her first. Like, wow, it's your name in the opening credits by itself. You know what I mean? Performance by her. Cassidy is fantastic. Leon is played by Brian James.
Yeah, Brian James.
Wonderful, wonderful actor. And Roy Batty's played by Dutch import Rutger Hauer, who had made his debut 2 years earlier, very memorably, his English-speaking debut in Nighthawks as a very verbose terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
And Rutger Hauer is a through-the-roof guy. And at this time, he mellowed with age like we all kind of do. But at this time, he just came into the room like a rock star. When they came to the reading, he wore like a big leopard print coat and a huge pink feather boa. And he had like eye makeup on and stuff. And I mean, he just came in the room like, you can't not deal with me. I'm here and I'm going to take over everything that I'm a part of. And that's what he does in the movie as Roy Batty. It's an incredible performance. And we got a lot of Rutger Hauer performances that I love, but it's just tough to top this one because it's so amazing. And very famously, I guess we get to it, but we might as well talk about it now because it happened during the read through. He's got this. He's a guy who, once he gets going, like does a lot of speechifying, and he's got this big monologue that he gives near the end of the film, where it's the urban legend, the film legend, which is false, is that he somehow just said all this stuff on the spot and it was just poetic and brilliant. That's not accurate. He didn't really make up any of it. All of it is in the script, save the very final line, which he didn't even make up on the set. He made up on the read-through before a set had even been built. But he still improvised a very key line that's a very important part of Blade Runner lore. And when he did it, he looked down the table at David Peoples, one of the two screenwriters that were still involved at this point, and he winked at him. And he's basically saying, nothing you did, man. He didn't know that he wasn't the one who wrote most of it, but nothing's sacred. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to do whatever I want. And Ridley, because he's not a screenwriter, is going to let me. And it's really obvious that that's what's going on here. I'm going to upstage the hero. I'm going to do whatever I want. Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty is the stuff of film legends. So, and it started with his performance at the read-through, where he's already performing for people. All right, Tyrell headquarters.
Yep. So we get to Tyrell headquarters where we
a movie set,
get to meet Tyrell. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the most beautiful interior set designs I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
The way it's lit, the way the models and the mats are projected behind and outside the windows. The way the characters are always smoking cigarettes because they want everything smoky. And when they can't get the smoke from a cigarette or that's not enough, they get smoke other ways. So there's all these beams and shafts of light. That's apparent already in the movie, but this scene is where we establish that smoky, weird future. This is a place of wealth. It's a giant, like, dining room, sort of formal conference table. They have an owl that's flying around freely in the room. Is that a real owl? Of course not. Of course, it's a synthetic owl. Even the richest people in the world don't have a real owl. what are you, crazy? Is
Right.
the sort of attitude about it. And this is the scene where we meet both Dr. Eldon Tyrell, who runs the Tyrell Corporation, and his niece Rachel. And they're obviously high up in the hierarchy of the building. Tyrell owns and runs the thing. And you get the feeling that she's sort of his protege of some kind. She's pretty smart. She's pretty deliberate the way that she interacts with Ford. And she's got a lot of wit and a lot of, it's hard to explain, but she's got a lot of noir sort of tough chick to her personality.
Yeah.
But I think through Young, and I don't know if this is conscious or just that she's just barely a kid and just starting out in movies in this film, she has this childlike naivete to her at the same time. And these things are at war with themselves within her. So even though, so again, it's this really weird, deep character that's, you could say, well, she's inconsistent, but it really is one thing is sort of a performance to mask the other, is the feeling that you get. And only on a few choice occasions do you really get what she's really thinking. And it's only when she's sort of at her most emotionally vulnerable. Sean Young's not an actor I particularly like a lot, but and when Morgan Paul was working with the two Rachels, he was sure that it wasn't going to be her, because he didn't think she just didn't think she was refined or making actorly like choices. But Scott saw she is this thing in a way that I want that essence to be on screen, and I believe I'm going to be able to capture that. And he does. Rachel's great in this, and this Sean Young's as good in this as she's ever going to be.
Right.
And she's made a real career for herself, to be fair to her. No Way Out, in Dune to a lesser degree, but throughout this era, she made a career of playing these characters with these really stern, sort of confrontational exteriors that when they're revealed are really vulnerable and really deeply human and like frightened people. And she really, really does that well, and has never done it better than she does.
Yeah, she plays that moment where at a moment of revelation, she really captures how a facade can crumble away, leaving a raw naivete, or a raw,
without saying
almost childlike,
anything.
Without saying anything. That is one of, I think that we could say that's one of her gifts, one of her natural gifts.
We'll get to that
she was able to utilize.
Blade Runner Deep Dive episode 4, because this is not going well, folks.
All right.
Anyway,
and really, I'm sorry if you've listened to our show. Did you really think that this was just going to be
you never know.
Fly through this?
You never know.
So
it's only a 2-hour movie, but it is really loaded with a lot of meaning. This is great storytelling, because we've seen the Voight Comp test before. Now we know what it is. We have some expectations of these weird questions, although they get weirder and weirder every time, which is great.
Right, and we only hear just a tiny handful of these questions. They're really random, and then we find out, later he's asked 100. He's asked well over 100 plus questions. 100 plus questions.
Yeah,
so you can only imagine some of the random
one crossfade where we skip all that time. But you do feel, again, it's really well done. You do feel like time has passed. The crossfade is a magic thing, It's a magic thing where a crossfade, time has passed, a cut, time has not passed. Or if you're going to cut, you got to cut from one big change to another. You can't just cut to some future time.
You have to establish that time. Yep.
Eldon Tyrell basically says, well, okay, I'll bring out the replicant, but before we do it, I want to see how this test works. I've never seen this. Why don't you do it on an actual person, and let's see what a negative test looks like. And he says, what, on you? And he's like, no, try her. So it's Rachel that takes the Voight Comp test, and it's you see that the technique of giving the test is to be confrontational and to keep the subject off balance, just like Holden was doing in the opening scene. He does that with Rachel. He doesn't let her change the subject. He only lets her sort of answer the questions directly. If she talks back, hops on her and keeps her on task. So it's a very confrontational thing. And Rachel's having a little bit of fun with it until she isn't.
Yeah.
It's somewhere along the line, this becomes a really uncomfortable, awful, invasive, personally invasive sort of thing. And even though she does her duty, she's rattled by the end of it. And Eldon says, hey, would you leave the two of us alone for a moment? She walks out. The way Rachel walks, just her shoulder pads, everything. We don't get any close-ups. We don't get any close-ups of her legs or anything lascivious like that, like a noir thriller. But the way she walks on those heels, it's weird. It's alien almost. It's like it's really, really strange.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of Bugs Bunny cartoons when or like cartoons when they do a noir where they do a funny noir thing, and when the femme fatale comes in, how they walk, and and again, that was kind of
and yet
done, so there's a artificiality,
but there's no swagger to it. She's not Jessica Rabbit.
Not Jessica Rabbit, but like
she's like a kid trying to walk like that is what it feels like. And
great,
and it's awesome. I don't know how to explain it, and it's so unique that they couldn't really, when they had to try and recreate it for the sequel, they couldn't really figure it out just by watching it. They had to get Sean back involved to explain to them, this is how you do it, like physically. That's cool. That just shows you that there's a lot going on with her, and with her as a performer and that character all in one. And that's what you like to see in these sorts of things.
So
Eldon
Terrell,
drops the bomb. Or it's really
Deckard. It's Deckard.
Deckard guesses it. And this is where the spoilers start rolling in hard and heavy. She's a replicant.
Well, you've already seen it. Yep. I know, dear audience, you've already seen it.
Well,
right.
She's a replicant, isn't she? And he's like, how many questions did it take? And he's like, she doesn't know. And he's like, how many questions? Dr. Eldon Terrell, played by, again, in a sort of weird, otherworldly, like scholarly, but out of touch with humanity kind of way, by Joe Turkel, with his giant trifocal glasses.
Those glasses were spectacular.
Those glasses are awesome. I guess glasses technology has gone backwards in the future, but
right.
But while other things have advanced, I guess at their expense. But nevertheless, those glasses are effing brilliant. And Turkel is such an exacting presence in this. He's exactly what you need to think of his turn as the bartender in The Shining, and he's just awesome. I love him. And he breaks it down for us. Yeah, she's a replicant. She's kind of a new breed of them, where we don't tell them that they're replicants, and we put, implants in their brains so that they, what does he say? It's all important what he says. It's all exposition, but it's all super important. He says,
it's our
these creatures only have 4 years to develop themselves emotionally. And that's what's making them crazy, and that's what's making them lash out, and that's what's making them violent. We think what the term he uses is, if we gift them with a past, we provide a cushion for their emotional development, and as a result, we can control them better. So so it's not the intense physicality or any of that stuff that Rachel's displaying. She's the most human replicant that Deckard's ever come across, because she thinks she's a person, believes it, and it makes her really, really difficult to detect. But it does sort of show a slightly more stable version of these androids than we see throughout the rest of the movie. So in a sense, those memories are working. They're doing their job. They've convinced her that she's had a whole childhood and a whole existence. And that's the more you think about it, the more kind of crazy of an idea that is, and how hard it would be to create a whole individual past for somebody artificially in their mind. But it's a huge idea that's really, really fun, and that we get to kind of explore. And he's incredulous. And again, you can see from Ford's reactions, this isn't good. This is terrible.
Yeah, he's like,
every time they
them
make a
memories,
new version of these, they make them worse. You know, like you could just kind of get that he's not into it. Where's he go from here, Joel? Help me out.
So then we get so then Deckard, you know, after this conversation with Terrell, well, then he has to go search Leon's apartment.
Oh, right.
He finds, and in the apartment he finds a batch of photos and an animal scale and
we think it's a sequin at first.
That's I should.
It actually looks like it looks like a sequin.
Looked like a sequin to me. It looked like a. And it's kind of, it looks like a kind of like a maybe an artificial fingernail, maybe, you know, like a press-on nail or something. So it's, and we do come to find out it's a scale. So then he gets it checked out, like he's like going around to like some of the restaurant stuff or the, you know, in the market. Like it's like a big giant
it's like the Turkish marketplace. It's an incredible section, although we're many scenes from there. But he is exploring this apartment. The apartment, again, is, like I said, it's not a fancy new apartment with laser scanned door locks and big screen TVs. It's this old 50s looking apartment. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And it's a hotel, the same difference. It's a long stay hotel in an old town. That's what you would have had back in the day.
It's an extended suites.
Yes. And he does this investigating. Ford said, you know, he was interested in the movie and was interested in working on something that was sort of this unique, but he referred to the character as a detective who doesn't do any detecting. All this shit just happens to him. So these sequences are sort of added into the thing so that he has this sequence a little bit was changed slightly so that he was more of a clever detective, and especially the deal with the photographs and how that connects everything. That was not Ford's idea, but that was an answer to a note that Ford had about the character, where it's really not interesting to him to just bump into these people at random. There should be detective work. Otherwise, what's so great about this guy?
Right.
That he has to be, you know, blackmailed out of retirement to take care of all this. But it's an interesting scene. And the origami in this case is made from a match, and it's a guy with an erect penis who's clearly Gaff's chicken in the first scene is commenting on what he thinks of Deckard. This guy is this little match man who is jerking himself off. It reflects what Gaff thinks about this particular investigative exercise.
Yep.
The origamis is fantastic.
So, Edward James, almost the whole thing is just, and all the character quirks, everything is so great.
He's such an important character for a guy that you just don't hear from at all. You know, you really do get his attitude. But he knows that he's a glorified chauffeur essentially in the early goings.
So while Deckard is back in his apartment drinking heavily, because that's what he does.
Well, actually, in the elevator on the way up to floor 97 where he lives, you hear a sound behind him while he's sort of resting, and he turns around, and hidden in the shadows in the corner of the elevator is Rachel.
Right.
And every time we see Rachel, it's always in this. She has these clothes that are just crazy elaborate and just make her feel like this wealthy thing that doesn't belong on the streets or in a scratched up elevator like this. Yep. She always feels like a fish out of water in a great way. Mm-hmm. And she's like, hey, what did he tell you? What's going on? Hey, what's going on with me? Like she's having a crisis.
He won't see me. He won't see me anymore.
He said, he's like, well, ask Terrell, ask your uncle. He'll tell you. And she's like, he won't see me. That's a sign that Terrell doesn't want to deal with the emotional ramifications of his own choices. And it's a sign that Rachel is motivated to get answers in any way she can. So she seeks out being rich and powerful. She seeks out Deckard's home and rides up there with him. And he doesn't want to deal with her either at all. But eventually, he slams the door in her face, and then seconds later opens it up and is like, Why don't you
You
come
want
in
a
for a drink? We'll all
you
have
want
a
a drink?
drink and we'll
Yeah.
all feel better is his solution to this.
Yeah. But so while all that is happening, Roy and Leon go
Oh, yeah.
visit Chew.
Well, we see that
the-
he says Roy. We see Leon outside the Yukon Hotel, which was his hotel room. It's mentioned in the opening
yeah,
scene.
Leon.
We see him watching that these two cops are digging around in his place, and we see Batty for the first time. And when we see him,
Yep.
that's me sort of clenching a fist. It's hard to explain, but this
your hand is is involuntarily clawing up. Yeah,
it's like a dying spider.
Exactly. That's the image. Yep.
And that's a sign that he's dying. Basically, we don't know that for sure now. Maybe he's just weird. We really don't know much about Roy when we meet him, other than what the dossier said. But that's a sign that he's dying. And what's his first thing he says? Time enough, he says, which is a repeated thing throughout. And he says to Leon, when Leon comes up to him, he says, "So did you get your precious photos?" And Leon says, he doesn't really say anything. He shakes his head. He goes, there's somebody there. He goes, "A man?" He's like, he nods. "Policeman?" You see Roy get all
the way
frowny.
he chews the words. Police.
I can't sit here and reenact every scene, but God, the stuff that comes out of Rutger Hauer's mouth. I mean, it's just all of it. It's even this weird interrogation we're about to see with the great James Hong. One of us, Minnesotan, kind of. He's a guy who does genetic engineering. He creates eyes. The very first shot of a person in this movie was a close-up of an eyeball. The trifocals, and the not being able to see really the madness behind the glasses. Eyes are a really, really important thing. They're a thematically important thing. They're the windows to the soul, and yet they're masked by things often in this, sometimes if only by reflections. They're a really weird replicant death fetish.
Yeah.
They're an important part and an unspoken part of the visual storytelling of Blade Runner. And so the fact that they're our first visit to one of these, because getting in at the corporate level wasn't working for Leon. He got found out. They're going to start with an independent contractor who's got an eye shop out on the street to get some information. Any information is better than what they got now. Hong's in there working. James Hong's great in this. All the bit players in this are just fantastic. You know what I mean? Taffy Lewis, Abdul Ben Hassan, the snake salesman, like just literally every guy and girl that you bump into on the street has a huge personality that is detailed and interesting and feels like it has an off-screen life to it. I love that. It's not needed in every damn movie, but in a movie like this, it's so welcome. It's full of characters, not just characters, but characters that are characters. Right. And that's fun. It keeps the thing lively and cool. And Hong's no different. They basically torture Hong. He works in this eye manufacturing area that's like a deep, cold freezer. And they strip him of his protective gear and they ask him questions in the slowest possible way. That is, we feel the torture of it. Just spit it out. What do you want? And Roy won't do that. He finds out, poor Chew. Chew. I don't. He's like incept dates, life expectation. We need to know about it. He's like, I don't know such stuff. I just make eyes, just eyes. Yeah. Just, that's all I do. You Nexus 6, I made your eyes. And I think there's a lot of great ones, but I think the best line in the whole movie is Batty saying, "Chew." He grabs him and pulls him close to him, but not in a threatening way. He's smiling at him, and he says, although it is threatening, he says, "Chew, if you could see the things I've seen with your eyes."
Yep.
It's the first sign that we're meeting a character who, despite some really awful stuff that he does, loves his own life, cherishes life, is something that we've not seen to this point in any of the other characters that we've experienced who seem to hate and resent their lives. It's a fantastic line. We don't see what happens to poor Chew, but he gets killed. They leave a trail of bodies everywhere they go. So Leon probably snaps his neck or something. But Chew does say, if you want to get to Terrell, there's a guy like me who can help you. His name is Sebastian. Sebastian who? J.F. Sebastian.
Sebastian.
And where can I find this J.F. Sebastian? Thank you for not skipping the iShop. iWorks, it's called.
Yeah.
Because I was skipping right on by that to Rachel and Deckard. Deckard proves to her. He proves to her by citing the highlighted memories that make up her character back to her that she's only ever kept to herself. That she's a replicant. And as Joel said, the armor drops. It just drops completely. She's not crushed in some sort of histrionic, weepy way. It's just this horror that you see come across her eyes again. And her reaction to it is just utter despair. What would it be like to find out that you were a manufactured thing? That question of identity here is a major, major moment. And
that everything that you think you remember is fake. It was put there by someone.
They're not your memories. They're someone else's. He says they're Tyrell's nieces. What a harsh thing to say. And she even recognizes the wit of it by smirking somewhat, but you can just see that it's cruel. It's an effing cruel thing to say, Joel. And it feels like a slap in the face when he says it, even though he's not trying to be cool. What he doesn't like is dealing with the BS. That's clearly what this character's about. We want to talk about what's true. Here's what's true. And she, he goes, okay, I'm sorry. That was terrible of me. Let me get you a drink. We'll have a drink.
Yeah.
And when he heads out to get her a drink, she very understandably storms out of the apartment.
Right. So then we get to see Pris for the first time. We meet. We meet. We haven't seen.
We do. We cut back to him with the Vesper machine, the photographic machine. That's right.
Yeah, that's so. Right before that,
we've seen her headshot, and now we get to see her walking down the street, and she just looks like a street vagabond. Obviously, 24-year-old or whatever it is. Daryl Hannah is gorgeous, and she's got this weird cyberpunk sort of wig on, and more than any other character probably in the story, she looks like we would think a visualization of a human robot would look. She really does look like right out of a comic book, essentially.
Yeah, especially if this is a pleasure model. Yeah,
stockings and exactly. And she looks completely rough around the edges. She looks like somebody who's been, sexually assaulted repeatedly for 3.5 straight years or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's probably what her life has been. She goes over into the corner and pulls a bunch of garbage over herself to snuggle in for the night like a homeless person. And up in a little mini bus, basically, we'll call it. I don't know if that's the right allegory I'm trying to make. Maybe not. But he pulls up in this thing and out jumps William Sanderson. William Sanderson's another really, really good actor. Really good character actor. One
of those guys you've seen in everything.
Yeah, you'll know him right away. He plays sidekicks and country bumpkins. He's made a career out of it. He was most famously cast as Larry, Daryl, and Daryl on the Newhart Show.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Here it's different. He looks different to us. He walks weird. He's he's a relatively young man in this film, and he looks kind of old and decrepit. And he drops his keys. I think he's got this big keychain. We're outside of where he lives. He drops his keys and he startles her, and she jumps up and she runs and smacks into him, and she runs into his van, and she breaks a window on it. And before she can run away, he says, "Hey, you forgot your bag." That's how he says it. And he kind of holds it out to her, and they do the whole grabbing the bag, the distrusting thing. But Pris is here for a reason. It's not one of the replicants didn't just bump into JF Sebastian by accident.
Right.
And this is, for lack of a better word, the perfect seduction for this particular guy. Being the needy, helpless person that he can help is exactly playing into his online porn profile, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
They've she either figured it out or she just intrinsically knows, based because of this predetermined role she was created to fulfill in her life, how to play this guy. And it's a fantastic scene where they kind of laugh at how they freaked out, and there's all these millions of little things that happen as they come together, and it ends with him inviting her in. Why not?
Yeah.
And it's great. Poor JF. God, geez, what a tragic character this cat is.
Yep.
He's not about to invite her in. That's not part of his character. She has to insist almost that he does before he does it. I'd be the same way.
Yep. She's like, I'm really hungry, JF. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
It just endears you to him, and with the sound. But there's this great scene where he turns around, starts unlocking the door, and we cut to Pris, Daryl Hannah, standing there. And as soon as she is not performing for him, the life completely drains out of her face. The music cue really makes it really sinister, but it's the performance, because it's not she doesn't scowl or anything. She just, that active of her being on as a performer and then suddenly not, is a profound moment and a very threatening moment.
Right.
And then we make our way up to his apartment. It takes a long time to get there. This is the interior of the Bradbury Building in downtown Los Angeles. Is one of the most shot buildings in the history of movies and television. If you want to see it in all its glory, I recommend Mike Nichols' Wolf. The publishing firm in Wolf takes place inside the Bradbury. But if you do want to see it in a noir thriller where it's completely disguised as an old rundown place, no better place than Blade Runner. This is one of the coolest practical locations ever. It's so well done. No housing shortage around here, JF says when he's making small talk, and you can see why. He makes his way up the old school, like, metal elevators that they have, like those cage elevators, and heads into his apartment, where he's greeted by a couple of genetically engineered toys, right?
Yep. Pris asks him on the way up, "It must get awfully lonely being here." And he's like, "No, I make friends.
I got friends. I make them.
I make friends. They're my hobbies, and
they're toys. I make them.
Toys." Yep.
Yeah.
And so walk in, and he's greeted by, they're both greeted by a menagerie of
little things and
different people,
different stages of replicant-like development. Some are truly just mechanical wonders. Others feel like people, although very simple with very direct things. But he comes in, and there's no toys waiting for him, so he says, "Home again." And these two little creatures come up, and they say, home again, jiggity jig. Good evening, JF. And then they turn around and walk away, because that's pretty much all they're programmed to do, that we see anyway. Right. And Pris is, despite herself, and it's different. It's different from the scene down on the street. She's delighted by these things. She has a kinship with them, and she's impressed by this guy now in an actual way, and not, I'm faking my way, you know what I mean, into some guy's, some poor unfortunate Mark's heart, or John, if you will. And it's cool. It's again, a very cool that Ridley captures, and that Daryl delivers that change in attitude when we come into this place. I love it. And his apartment is huge and cavernous. No housing shortage, no doubt. It feels like an old Napoleon era French sort of giant high-ceilinged place. It's just a place completely out of time, out of this century even. Blade Runner famously takes place in the year 2019, which every time I've showed Blade Runner to somebody in the last 20 or so years anyway, it always gets a laugh, because that just doesn't feel very far off into the future. Of course, it's not in the future at all anymore. That's the problem with dates and stuff. But I wouldn't, Joel, I wouldn't trade my Los Angeles 2019 title card for anything. It is so cool. And Vangelis backs it up with the big bitchin' sound, and it's the last little bit of text we see before the movie starts.
You know what? At least it didn't say present day.
At least it didn't say present day. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we have JF, Sebastian, and Pris getting to know each other. They're, little small talk, and like Brian said, Pris is legitimately kind of enjoying JF Sebastian. We learned that JF Sebastian, again, kind of fitting into this theme of age and growing and running out of time. We learned that JF Sebastian, the reason why he looks so old, even though he's a young man, is because he's got
Methuselah syndrome.
Yeah, Methuselah syndrome, where
his glands age at a really fast rate, and the rest of them doesn't keep along. We find out that's why he's still on Earth as well.
Yeah.
He'd be like everyone else. He'd be gone if he could have passed the physical to join the off-world colonies, shining chance to begin again in a world of opportunity and adventure. We keep hearing that little advertisement playing everywhere we go in the city.
Yep.
He's still on Earth precisely because he's sort of trapped here, and like our antagonists, he's growing old.
Yep.
Against, at an unnatural rate against his will.
Against his will.
It's an interesting point of connection between him and them, I find.
Yep.
So
then we get so then we cut back to Deckard. Deckard back in the apartment. Is he drinking? Yes, he's drinking. Yeah. And we get a little technology.
He's still rocking the Black Label whiskey at this point.
Yes, he is.
It was too expensive, but you can buy the Black Label bottle and the rocks glasses that he has in the movie. If you go to like Amazon, you can buy it, but it's like $120. Not too much, but too much.
Not too much, but if you better be a diehard fan if you're gonna roll up on that.
If you're gonna go with that, but it's very cool. Black Label, which is a real company. It's this. There's something called the Blade Runner curse. It's okay to talk about this now since we're gonna get to Zora, and that's about as far as we're gonna get clearly with this. Black Label. The film's got something called the Blade Runner curse. Black Label is still around, so that didn't suffer it, but it's got tons of logos. Company logos of companies that were real big in 1982: Pan Am, Atari,
TWA, Atari.
It's just a whole list of them, many of which didn't survive much further than, certainly didn't survive till 2019.
Right. Coca-Cola made it though. That was good for them. Coca-Cola made it.
Yeah, Coke made it. The Kodak, the companies that evolved, Kodak, Koss, TDK, those companies all hung around, but none of them were famous for what they were in 1982 by the time 2019 rolled around. For all the photographs we see, you don't need Kodak. I guess you kind of need them, but regular people don't need them like they used to. Let's just say that.
Right.
And that means you got to evolve, because when you're one of the top two companies that sell something everybody buys, and suddenly only just tiny subset of people buy it, you got to evolve as a company, and they did. So they hung around. And Coca-Cola, we weren't going to stop drinking Coca-Cola.
Right. But this is where Ryan mentioned we get our first little bit of sort of future technology. And this is Deckard actually doing some detecting. He takes one of Leon's photos. He's able to scan it into a system, and this is where we what would be what in CSI parlay, it would be center and enhance. And he says that
several times.
Yep. Yeah, and he's able to go around to
he's able to go way into this photograph. It's very cool and moody how he investigates it. The photograph itself is very arty and weird and shadowy, and there's stuff hidden everywhere, but he goes all the way into it. He goes so far into the photograph that a hair in the photograph is like you can almost see the cellular structure of it. when something in the foreground is masking our view. But he goes all the way through the room that the picture's taken up, into the next room, into a mirror in the next room, and sees within the mirror the profile of a woman lying on a bed, who seems to have a serpent of some kind tattooed on her cheek. And he makes the connection between the little sequin scale that he pulled out of the bathtub at Leon's apartment and this woman with a reptile of some type on her face that was in that apartment, because it's a picture of that apartment. And now he realizes, well, something was in the bathtub. I got to check this out. I got to find out what this is. And the way you find out what that is to go to this marketplace that Joel mentioned before, which is, again, when you talk about the combination of the old and the new, this marketplace is so huge. It's one of the things like you just can't pull off with all the CG magic that there is in the world. Even though this isn't some zoomed out huge thing. It's all, we're on ground level with all this stuff, but it's populated and huge and dense, and it feels like it's labyrinthian and goes on forever. It's a true talent. Joel referred to this as Ridley Scott's Blade Runner at the beginning of the show. I never call it that. I never, ever call it that, because Ridley didn't write this. He didn't write the book. He didn't write the script, but so, and it's not to take credit from him, because I'm about to just tell you how awesome he is. But I just always feel like he's not the final authority on this movie, and you shouldn't let him be. That's my advice to you. I'm not going to really get into my disagreements with him, but just to say that he's not the final authority on this. Just a lot of people have a lot of different takes about what's going on in this film that are every bit as legit. And that's what happens when you're an intensely gifted visualist like Ridley is, and he is. He's the guy who, he didn't really fire Hampton Fancher. He sent him one too many notes, and Hampton just said, "I'm done with this. I'm done with this. I wrote this work of art script that everybody loves, and you're just trying to turn it, you're trying to mutate it, and I don't like that." And it's a funny story. It's worth telling here. We'll tell it while we're talking about the market and Ridley. So with Hampton no longer making script adjustments based on Ridley's every whim, which he has many when he's working on a film, they had to hire another screenwriter who would do just that. And they found David Peoples, barely published or sold anything, but had written something that somebody saw that impressed him and was nearby. And they had this meeting with him. And they said, well, first, here, read this. This is what we're working on, and tell us what you think. And Peoples is most famous for writing Unforgiven and the adaptation of 12 Monkeys. Really, really good screenwriter. This was sort of his first big gig, and he came back into the room, and they're like, well, what do you think? And he said, it's perfect. I wouldn't change a word of this. Basically what he said. He said in his brain, he wasn't realizing that by saying it's perfect and I don't want to rewrite any of it, he was saying I don't want the job, more or less. Right. He was not thinking of it from a career standpoint. He just read something that he just thought was amazing and didn't want to tinker with it, basically, or didn't have any ideas for how he can improve it. It's funny because Hampton and David Peoples, the two screenwriters, didn't meet until the premiere of the film, and they sat and watched it together. And now, whenever you interview them, they're always together, which is, I think, is very, very cool, because Peoples was brought in as a tool of the producers and stuff to change Hampton's vision, and that's two guys with shared credit that shouldn't necessarily get along on a philosophical level. But the beauty of that story and that friendship is that it started with people saying, without Hampton in the room or anyone to impress, this is awesome. You know what I mean? Like, this is really, really good. I can't rewrite it for you. And Ridley, that's he loved that, because he thought the script was awesome too, even though he wanted his stuff in it. He thought it was awesome. So he liked that. He liked the enthusiasm for the project. And the other thing he liked was David didn't have his own ideas for how to improve it, which meant that Ridley got to provide him with what he wanted, and people should just have to execute it. And some of the very best stuff in Blade Runner is Ridley having some weird idea that David put on paper that was awesome. But Ridley Ridley makes this market what it is. He makes it unlike anything you've ever experienced, and yet very, very familiar, like something that you could go downtown and experience right now. He's such a gifted filmmaker at this point. He's in that phase, that Close Encounters, Jaws phase that Spielberg went through, where he's just way too naive to think he can't do something. So that visual ambition and that directing ambition is full-throated and in every frame of the film, and he doesn't take no for an answer, and he makes tons of enemies and he makes everybody uncomfortable, but he came up with something that I can't think of but anyone working at the time could have came up with this film. And in that way, I'll say it once and the only time, it really is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. He's the only guy who could have made this movie what it is. And this market scene is just amazing. So he brings the scale up to this interesting lady character, and she puts it in this she's got her own little scanner, and she finds within the microscopic peaks and valleys of this little tiny flat thing that we're looking at, a serial number. So it's a manufactured scale. And what does he say? Fish scale? And she says, no, not fish scale, snake scale. This is from a snake. She goes, here's the number. Ali Ben Hassan made this snake. He's right down there. And so after having to get out of a way of a bunch of ostriches and all kinds of crazy traffic that's going on in this weird place, the ostriches are my favorite. He does what you should never do to a snake in an aquarium. He taps on the glass. But Ali Ben Hassan, instead of saying, hey, don't tap the glass, says, oh, look, it's a customer. This guy we only see through an aquarium, and he's this fully realized guy. I love Ali Ben Hassan.
Abdul. I'm sorry. I hate to correct you.
Ben Hassan.
Abdul Ben Hassan.
Hey, let's get it right, man. That's what you're here for.
Yeah, and that's what I just wanted to make sure that because we do. He's great. And again, he makes the most out of this.
We should say. Why not?
What the heck? I just had it here. Ben Astor.
He gives a fun performance. He's only on screen for a couple of seconds, and you totally know who this guy is. He's a total salesman. He sees someone interested in his snake. He sees big money. He's like a car salesman. He's got a big snake wrapped around his head. He's got this sort of, ethnic exoticism to him. But in the end, he's just a guy wanting to make a deal. And that comes across so great. He keeps and when Deckard identifies himself as a police officer, he plays the whole, I'm going to try and not say anything to this guy. But he folds like a deck of cards when Deckard grabs him by the scarf or whatever and says, hey, you're going to tell me. And he tells him, Taffy Lewis on the line down in, he gives him the address even. He just blurts it all out. So then Deckard, fun character.
So then Deckard goes over to the club. He's checking out the club.
With all this crazy fashion and all these people are they're definitely city folk, but they're a little bit higher end. And he sits down at the bar and says, hey, where's who runs the place or whatever? And it's this guy, Taffy Lewis, again, who plays Taffy Lewis. He's fantastic.
Looking. Doesn't want to give it to me. Tell me who it plays it.
Not somebody famous exactly. It's just a really, really great performance in a short amount of time.
Pike. That is
High Pike. So Deckard says, you ever buy snakes from the Egyptian, Taffy? This is just a great detective line out of context. It's hilarious. And he says, all the time, pal. Taffy, you can already tell, is not a pushover like Abdul. He's gonna put up a stink. And all of the usual threatening doesn't really work on him. What does Deckard say? He says, are your licenses in order?
Is up to date?
And then Taffy changes his tune, and he's like, hey, he says to the bartender, the man is dry. Give him one on the house. And then he turns to him and answers his question, and he does it in Spanish. He says, you can't threaten me with that. You can't come at me in any way. And Taffy has this twinkle in his eye, like, man, if it's snakes you're after, you're about to see the real deal in a couple of seconds. So it's just really well done. It's a really well done.
And Deckard gets to drink. Because then Deckard is just like, yep, cool.
Yeah, he gets completely neutralized by this weird drink with these weird, what look like maggots in the bottom of it. This weird, crazy place. And as he's thinking about it, he goes to call Rachel. Somebody says something that makes him think of her. I don't remember what it is, but there is a connection there. And he goes over to the video phone. Y'all love this. It's the video phone booth with the little screen in it. And, so not predicting the future correctly, but still video phone, and a phone call that costs $1.25 like that. We wouldn't really blink at now either, but in 82, that felt for a short phone call that felt like all the money in the world.
Probably got a little bit of a chuckle from the audience.
I would think so. But he calls her up in the middle of the night while he's at this club and invites her down for a drink. What an idiot.
She's like, I'm not going down there.
He's like, that's not my kind of place.
Yeah.
He's like, we'll go someplace else.
Yeah, well, then we'll go someplace. Yeah, hey.
And she's like, she hangs up on him, and $1.25 for you getting rejected over the video phone, bro. That's you better seriously, like, I'm not one for lines and stuff. Come out and say what you mean. I like Deckard in that way, but you gotta have a little finesse, man. She's a lady, clearly, even if she's an android lady. And you gotta make a little effort. So he gives up, finishes his drink, and then we hear an announcement in the background. And I know this announcement by heart. It's hard for me not to just Caddyshack this up, or what's the other movie all the time? Monty Python's Holy Grail, where you just sit with your friends and just reenact all hour and a half of these things. But this guy, and it's brevity too. It's so brilliant the way this exposition happens, because we don't see any of this. We don't see the stage. We're just sitting with Deckard at the bar from his perspective. And you hear the announcer in this weird affected voice say, see the magnificent Salome, watch her take the pleasure from the serpent that once corrupted man. Mm-hmm. And you see Deckard watches this for a couple of seconds. He doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
We're presume this is some twisted cabaret act where there's some sort of snake human masturbation going on or whatever. I don't want to think too much about it. Yeah. But even Deckard, who's got a pretty strong stomach, it's to his credit that he looks away and doesn't watch this once he realizes what it's going to be. But he does show up in a really fun Harrison Ford performance within a performance, I think. It's a little corny, but it shows you that while he can do this and would think to do it, he's not super great at it. But really, it's not even that the performance isn't working. It's that it's so obvious. It's that he's out of his league with this person who is an infiltrator, who does notice things about people, who does who has snuck into her fair share of back rooms to kill people in her life. And in this, so this act, while at first she's intrigued by it, later she turns against it. He's in the back room reading the trade papers, right? Just like Joel, the union guy, reading the Variety or whatever. And when Joanna Cassidy's Salome character comes walking by and we recognize the tattoo right away, he says, Miss Salome, Miss Salome. He puts on this geeky guy voice or whatever. And he tells her he's there investigating complaints about the management of the place. And he's got this great line, have you been asked to do anything lewd or unsavory to your person? And she looks at him, she goes, like what? She's just masturbated with a snake on stage in front of like 200 people.
Yep.
So the idea that the management is taking sexual liberties with people is not a scandalous idea to her at all. Or as Gianna, who's my former and brief editor, said, it's sad, even the film's misogyny and the way the film treats women, and it doesn't do it by accident, which is why you can watch it, but the way it handles them and the way they're dealt with in this society, rich or poor, it doesn't even matter which, they're tools and slaves to be used and discarded. Every single one of them, every woman we meet almost, except the lady with the microscope. She says, even in disguise, they're not exactly living liberated lives.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's true. They're not. What's Salome getting out of living this existence? Hiding in plain sight on stage, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Whatever the plan is, we're not feeling it. But it doesn't matter because we don't get that far into the conversation. She takes a shower. She's got all these weird sequences on her. It's all very cool. Her dressing room is populated with all kinds of weird exotic stuff. Ford has a really fun interaction with the snake while she's in there. She comes out and she's sort of flirting with him a little, but you just get the feeling that she's a dangerous lady. And she is.
We've been flirting with him to get him to try to catch him off guard.
Right.
Yeah. And so then
so if I find out about any of this, who do I call?
Me.
He says.
And she's like, "Here, help me put on the."
But it is fun. He's a guy pretending to be a pervert, pretending to be a union representative. So there is a depth to this like undercover work that he's doing in this scene. But you just feel like they said back in Hunter, if you looked any more like a cop, we'd have to write a movie for you where you played one. It's obvious who he is to everybody. And it would be even if this was the first time we were meeting him.
Yeah.
So she gets him. What does she say? Dry me. She's come out of the shower and she turns her back to him and gives him the towel and he starts drying her back.
Yeah. And then
she punches him, breaks his nose, leans down and starts to choke him to death with his tie when he's totally saved by the bell and a bunch of other performers come storming into this room and she's got to run out. And then we have this chase sequence on the street, right? Ridley Scott, holy smokes. This whole sequence is just kind of amazing. I don't quite know where to start. The Hare Krishnas are amazing. All the weird traffic signs that are talking at us are incredible.
Yeah, we get a huge. This is without being expository. We get an incredible glimpse at this world just as these two people
on ground level.
Running.
This
at ground level
district.
Yeah, while two people are running through it. Yeah, I mean it's just packed. It's jam packed full of people.
He goes in and out of an elevated bus that's moving slowly through a crowd to get to her. She tries a couple of hiding places a couple of times. The whole thing moves really, really fast, but it is sort of a slow foot chase because it has to be by necessity because it's just people everywhere. You just can't run full on in this setting.
And there's a couple points where he's trying to point his gun at her, but he can't take the shot because there's just too many people.
Too many people. Yep.
And then we get to a point where he does have an open shot, and she's running.
Open is a to a degree, but yes, he's got a place where he's comfortable. He's going to hit her. And he does. He shoots her 3 times in the back before she finally goes down. He shoots her out on the street. She crashes into a mannequin display case outside some weird exotic clothing store.
For some reason, when I was watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what Gap is going to look like in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
everybody's going to be dressed like her. They're going to have a transparent raincoat on and some weird leather bikini and some strange light up rings around our necks. That's the future, baby. Get ready, ladies, guys. We get to wear trench coats and boots,
trifocals, and weird trifocals.
However, Ridley really, really wanted Deckard to wear a fedora in this film, and was told by the costumer when she showed him the advanced one sheet for Raiders of the Lost Ark, which hadn't come out yet. You really can't put him in a fedora. This is the movie that he just finished making, and he was really sad. Because it is a fedora-like character, but I think in the end we're probably better off without that. Let's just say fashion in the future it's just not nice to the women. It's always a tougher thing for them.
Correct.
Her getting shot is this incredibly violent, harsh thing. By the time, it's exciting at first. Oh, he's going to get the replicant, but by the time he's done retiring Zora, it's just awful. He feels it. We feel it. It's just this horrific thing. She crashes through all this plate glass. She crashes through this display case that has fake snow coming down in it. She kind of lands on the cement, gets up, kind of turns around and crashes through another place of glass before she finally goes down. And it's just brutal. It's just brutal. It's whatever being she was, like, this is awful. And it also shows you the fight to hang on to life that is inside each and every one of these characters. Yep. The other thing we see that's important, little cutaway, is we see that Leon has been watching all this. He's
the whole time. Yep. And we get so goes over but by the time the police arrive at this time, and they're looking over it, and sure enough, we see Gaff, and Gaff is like, Bryant wants to talk to you.
Actually, Gaff comes up to Deckard and knocks him on the back of his shoulder with the cane. And Rick turns around and grabs the cane. He's about to kick his ass. And almost doesn't even blink. He just says, Bryant. Yeah. Which is pretty much the only English word we've heard him say twice in the movie to this point. And then then we cut to them getting together at the spinner, where Bryant and Emmett Walsh is laboring to get out of this little cockpit of this car. And he says, hey, he goes, good job, man. Way to go. You did it. You're the guy. I knew you were the guy. And he's giving him this celebratory thing while you can tell Deckard's just, as he says in the voiceover, that's not in the version we just watched. He goes, they called it retirement, but it didn't make me feel any better about shooting a woman in the back.
Right.
This has affected him, which is good. It should.
Yeah.
And Bryant's callousness and Gaff's little effing with him is not being taken in kind here. Yeah. And he says, well, you got 4 more and then you're done. And he's, no. He's like, 3 more. 3 more. And he goes, no, there's 4. That skin job that you interviewed over at Terrell Corporation, Rachel, turns out she's gone AWOL. Yeah, you're going to have to kill her too.
And Deckard
didn't even know she was a replicant. Something to do with implants, Tyrell says. Who cares? Just kill her too, and then you're done.
And Deckard is just like, that's where we're going to leave it for this episode, because Deckard,
you can tell the idea of shooting Rachel is the furthest thing from his mind. Yeah. And is the bridge too far? But like a clever character, and he is a clever character in a lot of ways, he's smart and keeps that to himself, even though we read it all over his face. He doesn't. Yeah. He protests the numbers, but he doesn't make a sound about her in this scene. So, that is a bit of a cliffhanger, I guess.
Yeah, that's the halfway point of the movie.
Is it?
We are 65 minutes into the movie, of this 2-hour movie. So that's why I think we should leave it right here. And
the second part will move a little bit faster, but we do have a lot of ancillary, like non-deep dive, one scene at a time stuff to talk about when we come to the end. So I think this will make a pretty good double episode.
So, all right, everybody, we are halfway through our deep dive of 1982's Blade Runner. It just so
some cool screenshots of some of the scenes we talked up on the Facebook page. Give them a glance. I wrote a print review for a defunct website project that we were all involved in that I saved for just the right time, and it's over there. I don't want to toot my own horn. It's one of my favorite bits of critical reviews that I've ever written, because I really am connected with the movie and wanted to. You get inspired to rise to the occasion, right? When you're writing about something great.
I want to point out we've made reference to a whole bunch of different versions of Blade Runner, and we're going to continue to make reference to all these different ones.
We'll break them down.
I guess I want to make sure the audience knows that we are the version that Ryan and I saw the other night. That is the basis for what we are discussing right now. Is called Blade Runner: The Final Cut,
and it is streaming right now on a major service, Netflix. I want to say.
Oh, really? Oh, let me see
the final cut. So it's just a few clicks away. If somehow you've gotten this far and want to watch it in between shows before we figure out how it all ends.
More watch time. HBO Max. and Netflix.
Oh, well,
So it's available on
Netflix.
HBO Max and Netflix.
And
right
it's
now.
the final cut that's out there. And the final
Yep.
cut's the best cut. Well, I'll explain to you all the differences between all the different versions.
Yep.
There are some debates about them, but in my opinion, if you're watching this for the first time, the final cut's closest to the
or frankly,
vision.
even if you've seen it, if you've seen it before and you're remembering, well, I remember the voiceover, I remember this. Well, go back, revisit Blade Runner, and see this version of Blade Runner, because it's
not. None of them are dramatically different from each other, but this is sans just a couple teeny tiny little things that I don't like about the final cut. Everything else about it is the way the movie's meant to be, clearly. So.
All right. So next week, we will I guess we'll continue talking.
It would be weird to do it any other way. I would agree.
Yep. We are going to hit up and we are going to continue talking. We're going to finish our deep dive into maybe the greatest sci-fi movie of all time, Blade Runner. That's going to do it for us for this week, everybody. You can reach out to us on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Ask Joel and Ryan. Ask Joel and Ryan at gmail.com if you want to email us. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave us a comment below and we will get back to you on that. Like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast delights, and like and subscribe us on YouTube. We got good stuff. Hey, this is good visual content too, because we're two really good looking guys, I think. All right, everybody, take care, and we will see you next week as we talk more Blade Runner.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.
My sister is by my side, and we are both going to say good night to you. Come on, Margaret. Good night, children. Good night, and good luck to you all.